So one thing I think people often get wrong about creativity is that it's something you either have or you don't. And they'll say things like, oh, I'm just not a creative person, or I'm just not creative like that. And I don't think that's true. I think creativity is something we all have, but it's just a matter of practicing and nurturing and experimenting with it. So I thought I'd give a little glimpse into my own creative process and what I do to boost my creativity, whether it's just getting into the right mindset for creating or how I generate and develop my ideas, but also what I do when I get into a bit of a creative rut. And maybe you also can get some ideas along the way for boosting your own creativity. For me, it really all starts with getting into the right mindset. So I always start my day with some morning movements, specifically outside. This is kind of the main reason I always go for a morning walk, to catch the morning sun and get some fresh air and just be in nature, really. I find that it really helps me clear my head, and I feel like a clear head is probably one of the most important things when it comes to being creative. I feel like if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're overwhelmed with other things, then the last thing you're going to be doing is coming up with really great new ideas. So I think it's a great way to sort of check in with yourself and let your mind wander. And it's also a really great source of inspiration for me. I feel like once you really start paying attention to what's around you, you'll find that there's something to be gained from pretty much everything you see, whether it's composition or gaining a new perspective or colors, or just realizing that there's little stories in pretty much everything around you. My morning routine has always been kind of sacred to me. I tend to take my mornings really slow, and I'm a firm believer that starting your day out in a rush filled with anxiety and stress is gonna affect your mindset for the rest of the day, really. I find that a clear mind just really makes me more receptive to ideas and just generally allow my thoughts to flow a bit more freely, which ultimately will help me think more creatively and come up with new ideas. The last thing that really helps me get into a more creative mindset is having a dedicated space to create. Whether it's just a little corner in your home or like this, an office, having a dedicated space that you can associate with creating can really help you sort of flip your mindset instantly when you enter the space. And I think if we think of creativity as a muscle that needs to be trained, having a dedicated space can really also help increase your motivation and dedication, kind of like a gym for your mind. My office space personally is filled with different trinkets or places I've been, things that have inspired me, things I've achieved, and different creative outlets of mine. It really feels like an extension of me. It feels like a space where I'm really free to create and experiment, and creativity is ultimately something that is so unique to each person, so having a space that represents who you are and is filled with the things that you enjoy and the things that make your creativity flourish is going to make it that much more inviting. And now that I've gotten into the right mindset for it, we go to the actual creative process, which I think could be a whole video in itself. So I'm only going to discuss kind of how I get ideas and how I develop my ideas. And the main way for me to do that is through writing. So I think writing for me is really important for a number of different reasons. The first being that it allows me to keep my thoughts and ideas organized, which I do mostly through this notebook. This is where pretty much every day without fail I will make a to-do list and have kind of a clear structure of how I'm to proceed on my projects, because otherwise things get way too scattered up in my brain. The second one is my idea development notebook, I guess you could call it. This is where I write down a lot of my scripts, a lot of my ideas, or even just shot lists, just anything that has to do with my videos. And I personally prefer writing on paper because it really just gets me in a flow-like state. I feel like I can articulate my thoughts almost in a more raw way than I would if I were to be typing, because I can't really edit it the same way I would be able to on a laptop. And then the last one is journaling. In my case, my videos are very introspective and they're very relevant to my life and things that I might be struggling with. So keeping track of how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, or any of my experiences really is super important. And I think in general, people's creations will always kind of be a reflection of the things they're going through in their life. So keeping track of your inner thoughts can be a really great way to actually access new ideas and maybe recognize certain patterns, or just to understand yourself a bit better. In general, I really love writing to develop the ideas that I already have further, but I think there's a big part of writing that I'm missing out on, which is idea generation. And I feel like for that, I would have to be a lot more consistent with my journaling. I will probably write in this maybe once every 3 months, which is not nearly enough. So writing for the purpose of idea generation is still something that I really would like to get better at, which leads me to the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. I think a really big part of being creative and exploring your creativity is to always stay curious and to always keep learning. And I think Skillshare is such a great and valuable platform to do so. It's made by creatives for creatives, and they have courses on pretty much everything you could possibly imagine, whether it's film, animation, illustration, graphic design, how to gain success on YouTube. They really have something for everyone. I've been taking this creative writing class, which essentially is a 10-day challenge where you're encouraged to write for about 10 to 15 minutes every single day. And it really allowed me to get back into the rhythm of writing, get more consistent with my writing, and also think more creatively. Whether you want to learn a new skill, pick up a new hobby, or find your next creative project, Skillshare will have something for you. There will be a link in my description, and the first 500 people to click the link will get 1 month of Skillshare completely for free, and you can get started with learning your new creative habit today. Now, like most people, I will eventually lose focus and start to procrastinate. And instead of mindlessly scrolling on my phone, I try to be a bit more mindful of my consumption and really watch content that genuinely inspires me. I think a key thing to remember when it comes to creativity is that being creative doesn't mean that all your ideas have to come exclusively from yourself. Everyone's creations are ultimately just a big mix of previous creations from other people that they've seen and were inspired by. So a big part of my idea generation process includes watching other people's content, whether it's the way in which they approached a topic, or simply the visuals that they use, the color grading they use, or just specific shots or angles. I find that there's so much to be gained from so many different people, and especially if I'm feeling a bit stuck in my creative project, I find that other people's content a lot of the times are also a great source of inspiration in terms of trying things that are completely new for me, or things that I may not have thought of before, or things that are a little bit out of my comfort zone. And continuing to learn and experiment is really key to finding your own creative voice. And the final part I want to touch upon is knowing when to let go. Something I experience quite often is that I get really tunnel visioned and get so set on this vision that I have in my head but somehow can't really bring to life, that I start over-analyzing and over-criticizing my work. And so recognizing when that happens, when you should just take a step back and give yourself a breather and also give your project some time to breathe, is super important. More often than not, when I revisit it, I find that it really wasn't so bad as I thought, or even the time away from my projects allowed me to gain maybe a new perspective or a new idea on how to move forward. What is equally, if not more important, is what you do when you take a step back, which I think is where hobbies or other creative outlets come in. Especially because my main creative projects are now monetized, I really find it so important to have creative outlets that aren't and that are really just for me. I get to be reminded of how essential the creative process actually is and how little the outcome should technically matter. Because really, creativity should feel fun for you. So for me, being able to step away from my computer and just create something with my hands, like playing the piano or painting, can really sort of help me fall back in love with the process of creating. Ultimately, everyone's creative process is different, everyone's creative goals are different, but the one thing we all have in common is that everyone can be creative. It just requires that you practice, experiment, occasionally fail, but most importantly, that you enjoy it.